If you use any of these 4 EQ moves to balance your masters and it still doesn't feel right, it's because balanced masters that are technical won't always feel great. And feeling great is where the money's at. You need to create masters that make people feel the music. So let's level up each of these EQ moves to have the flexibility and detail to really dial in an incredible sound so you never have to struggle with EQ again. The track we're working with is Coup de Grace by Dugong Jr. out with Majestic Casual. Just take a quick listen to this because it fucking sounds great.
Put your head down, baby. Cause we in there, ain't we? Spend a home for a nice pay. To get the shit laid, might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round class, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow.
It's banging. It's banging. Now, the very first move most people will do is add a high pass filter, okay? Because they want to buy headroom, but there's a bit of a fallacy here. So we've got a 50 hertz first order high pass. It is a little bit high, but if you're going to do any high pass filter, I always suggest start with the first order, okay? And then if you want to pull more sub, you can go 12 decibels and 25 hertz. And then you can go 18 decibels, sorry, and 12.5 hertz, because that's sort of relatively killing the same amount, well, not really the same amount, but it's just how I interpret using a high-pass filter. But that's not my level up, because I don't agree with high-pass filtering unless it's an absolute necessity. But again, let's go through the motions. So we're aiming to control this here. See this? That's the transient kick there. And then there's the flab just after it, around 50 hertz-ish to 60 hertz-ish. People roll off these subs that are down here and try and control that whomp of the kick that controls the limiter. But there's a little bit of an issue when they do this. Take a look at this.
I mean, she nervous round class, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round.
Sounds a bit like a cardboard box when you put that high pass filter in. Now we can tweak it, but it's not the point that I'm going to get at here. The fact is, our peak level actually increases. We don't buy headroom, it actually increases. So what we'll do is we'll play this before and after and look at the peak level.
That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it.
It actually ended up increasing the peak level by 0.5 decibels, which means any limiters at the end of the chain are going to be clipping, or not clipping, they're going to be reacting to a louder peak signal sooner. So we're not actually buying ourselves headroom in a technical sense. And the reason for this, if we go into Plugin Doctor here and look at the phase, is because you're rotating the phase underneath that frequency. So you're actually shifting the waveform with itself in order to make that cut. And when you shift that waveform, it gets thrown slightly off or in axis. So it's actually not just creating peaks, it's actually creating troughs as well. Sound-wise, we don't hear this phase shift. We will not hear the phase shift, but the limiter will read the phase shift. It'll read the higher peak value and start limiting sooner than it would otherwise. So this is important to note. So what do you do if you want to attenuate some of this? Let's go back to over here. Some of this subbiness in the kick drum. What you do is you do not use a high pass like this. What you do is, let's get Pro Q3 up over here. These are the pro version of it. So this is the pro level, and then we're going to go to an advanced level of doing this. What we're going to do is, so we said around, where are we? That starts at about 50 to 60 hertz, yeah? That's our 50 to 70 hertz-ish, all right? So if we're going, let's say 60 hertz, let's go up at 120, okay? Okay, let's go up at 120. We're going to make this a 6 decibel per octave, okay? So it's going to be fully attenuated when we're getting into those frequencies that we want. Let's go 120, and we're going to go -3, okay? That's going to be our cut. So instead of this one at the top here, which is this low shelf there like that, we're actually just going to cut it down there. So we're attenuating that frequency range there, identically the same, but instead of creating that big phase shift, we're being a little bit more subtle. And if we actually look over here on Plugin Doctor, if we do something similar here, we go 120, we go, where are we? Low shelf, there we are. -3, 6 decibels per octave, beautiful. That's the only phase shift we get. Okay, that's the phase shift, this little phase shift here, and that's not going to increase the peak level by a whole lot. It's not going to move that waveform around. So we're going to be able to control that subbiness in the kick, and it's probably going to sound a bit better because we get to keep more of those natural extension. But instead, we're not shifting the waveform. That's going to trigger the limiter to do more limiting because we've got a higher peak value. Let's actually see if we've done this to better effect, where we've got a better peak value here. Let's have a look. Go to the Pro version.
That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound got lost and then found she like it. That sound.
We actually have a lower peak value using this method of EQ, which means instead of being 3.4, we're at 4.1. We bought 0.7 decibels of headroom, but we were still able to attenuate those sub frequencies in a more natural way. So this is the first level up. This is to getting it to Pro. Now let's just compare the sonic signature of it, because we're going to have a lower extension in this, which is nicer while we're still controlling those subs.
We spend a home for a nice pay to get the shit laid. Might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard that sound got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard that sound got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
So we can just hear there, not only did we buy headroom, did we control the sub, and did we keep our low-end extension. It's a subtle little way to be able to not struggle with your EQ because you're thinning out the track by using high-pass filters. Use a low shelf, okay? The method, if you want the calculation, is you go an octave above where that fundamental is, -3 decibel, first order filter, which is -6 decibels per octave. So at this crossover point at 120 hertz, you're only attenuating 1.5 decibels, and then an octave below it, you're attenuating the full 3 decibels. The advanced mode now goes a little bit above this, okay? Because we have to do some recognition. At the moment, we're only working in the frequency domain, not the temporal domain. Now, by temporal, I don't mean dynamic EQ. I mean transient sustain EQ. And there's a reason why I'm saying transient sustain EQ, because if we go back over to this graph, that flab in the sub isn't on that initial transient, it's in the actual sustain of the kick. So with Ozone 11, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the music rebalance mode, focus on the drums, set up an equalizer. We're going to go surgical, so digital, low shelf, and this low shelf is going to be the surgical one. Okay, 120 hertz, -1.5, no, that's 0.7 is the Q, -1.5 is the gain. The reason why it's -1.5 and not 3 is because Ozone meters a little bit differently. In traditional EQ, if you go -3, the crossover point, it becomes -1.5. Here, you're actually listing the crossover point -1.5, and then it drops down to 3 at the max. It's a little bit different, but this is literally identical to what we just did with the Pro Q3. But instead of doing this, we're going to go transient sustain mode. We're going to turn this off on the transient, and we're going to put it on the sustain. Okay, so let's go low shelf again, surgical, fill that in, 120, 0.7, -1.5. Now let's actually have a listen to what it's taking away. We'll just turn that off. We're just listening to the sustain portion of the kick in the drum. That's all we're EQing out. Okay, so let's EQ it out and have a listen before and after. We'll get rid of that. We'll put this in. So it's just pulling back that sustain portion, and let's have a listen before and after.
Lay, might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard that sound got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard that sound got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
So how good is that? We're controlling that sub. It's like way tighter now, but it's very subtle. And this is where you get into the realm of making EQ changes that are musical and work for the mix itself. So we haven't transformed the mix into something that it sounds weirdly. Remember that first one we had? It started as a high pass filter to control the subs. We've worked into a low shelf, and then we've worked on to focusing on the element, the actual sustain of that kick, to controlling it with using a transient sustain module on the drums specifically. So listen to the high pass filter versus the much more advanced version.
Cause we in there, ain't we? Spend a one for a nice pay to get the shit laid. Might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd. She ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
The next is thumping or boosting for a little bit of in the kick drum. Let's show you typically what people do is they find a little notch in the low end here and they'll bump it up. Let's do that.
Yeah, ain't we? Spend a one for a she like it like wow.
Let's try that.
Time I love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found pay to get the shit laid. Might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then.
This is pretty good. This is pretty good way to get a bit of thump out of a track. Just a little bump to the lows, especially where the knock of the kick drum is. And if we look over here, we can see that kick drum lines up just about where I put that 75 to 220. I've put it about 95 hertz, a little bit below because I don't want it to sound a bit too cardboardy or that sort of sound. But there's something we can do to enhance this because at the moment it's making all the frequencies at this range louder. And I don't want that because the bass is getting a bit too woolly. Some of the effects in the background are getting a bit too woolly. Let's go to FabFilter Pro MB, and I'm going to show you something we're going to do. And this is pretty cool, actually, because you're probably thinking, oh, he's just going to use an expander. Absolutely not. I am not going to use just an expander. The Pro mode is a little bit more different. So let's dial this in. Let's get this, we'll center this at 90 hertz. 95 hertz, follow this.
She like it like wow.
Cool. We're going to be expanding this, but I want to be triggering it from something else. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into this expand mode, free. We're going to audition this here. We're going to find the transient of the kick, the very pokiest bit, the very frontward part of the sound.
Put your head on, baby. To get the shit laid, might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard.
You know what? This is one of the circumstances where the best place to sidechain this transient information is from where that bump actually needs to be made. Sometimes I like using the audition mode to find the transient that might be in like the click of a kick drum in the top end, or some of the thump a little bit lower, a little bit above, because it's a little bit sharper of a transient. In this circumstance, it is not. So we're going to leave it to that similar range of where the EQ is. That's a bit funny. Usually it's a little bit higher. But in this circumstance, absolutely not. But we're going to use this to trigger the expansion here. So let's dial this in. We'll get audition off there. We'll unsolo that. We're going to expand it 3 decibels. And we want to use a look ahead. So we're getting that transient on the forefront, leaning into the kick drum.
She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
So there we go. Let's have a listen now.
Shit laid, might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
So that's the second mode. Now, that's better because it's actually moving with the transient, which is nice. It's poking out. but there's a problem here. That's quite low in the frequency range. That's great and all, but it's not going to translate on small systems. So here is the advanced version of that. We're going to use the Michelangelo EQ, okay? Because what I want to do is I want to use the transient mode in the Michelangelo EQ, but drive saturation into the transient so it harmonically saturates every time it opens up. Magnificent, you say? Well, let's dial this in. So with the Michelangelo EQ, the first thing we need to do is find that frequency. So what we're going to do is we're going to crank this up, have a listen, and then sweep for where it is. It's going to probably be similar by using this mid-frequency modulator. So let's do that now. Okay, now that 175, we're going to just drop it down there. That's 47 hertz.
Might as well stay, she nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down.
Perfect, we know that's exactly where that smack is, so let's bring that back. We're going to go transient mode. Now, as it's playing, we're going to bring this sensitivity down, so that blue light only triggers when there's a transient in the frequency region.
Whole town getting fucking hype, and then whispering something to it, saying something like, put your head down, baby. Cause we in there, ain't we? Spend a home for a nice pay to get the shit laid. Might as well.
It's good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the expansion on here. So we're going to just get this attack super fast.
Stay, she nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got...
All right, and a bit more pentode because the pentode incorporates both odd and even harmonics.
Put your head down, baby. Cause we in there, ain't we? Spend a home for a nice pay to get the shit laid. Might as well.
That's great. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to listen to this. Just so we're covered our bases here. We've found the frequency we want to by sweeping it at a really loud volume. We then set the transient mode by bringing the sensitivity down. So this blue light only flashes when the transient is present. Then instead of boosting the EQ here, we're just expanding it with a very fast attack time, like a dynamic EQ. And then we're driving a little bit. I've opted for pentode saturation because we get both even and odd order harmonics. Now take a listen to this before and after.
We spend a home for a nice pay to get the shit laid. Might as well stay. She nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
That is bumping. That is really awesome. So you've got three different ways. You've got this generic sort of EQ boost, which just EQs everything. You've got this multiband one, which is actually a pretty clean way of doing it. But then if you wanted to have a little bit of edge, a little bit of saturation, something to move the speakers, especially small speakers, a bit more, driving some saturation onto that mid-channel in expansion with the Michelangelo EQ is the piece de la resistance. The next thing we're going to look at is this mid-side EQ. So we're not going to be left-right, we're going to be mid-side. And typically a lot of people like to add air to their side signal. Okay, so we're going to move this into stereo placement, side mode. Okay, we're going to add some air to the side signal. Now, this can sound good. We're going to go before and after, and you'll hear this. Then it's quite nice what it does to the mix, but have a listen first.
Pay to get the shit laid, might as well stay. She nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round guys, she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
That's good. That's good. It's absolutely not great. If you were doing this, you're ruining your masters. And I'll explain why. Now, remember how we talked about phase shift. All right. Now, again, this is actually a phase shift you will hear because when you're creating a mid-side matrix, encoding and decoding, you're taking the sum difference of the signal's phase relationships. Now, by using a natural phase EQ or normal phase EQ, you are actually shifting that phase in and out of itself. When you use mid-side EQ, you need to use linear phase because when you encode and decode the mid-side signal from left-right to mid-side, back to left-right, you want to make sure the phase information of the rest of the signal is in sync with itself so you do not shift the stereo image. And this is stupidly subtle, but it is a very good practice to do because you don't want to catch yourself in a situation where you're going, wait, that stereo field's a little bit off, or your client's giving you notes where they're like, something's weird with the stereo field. If you're using mid-side, use linear phase EQ, and that is literally the difference between the basic version of this, which is natural phase or zero latency, and then the advanced version, or the pro version, because we're going to get to the advanced version, which is linear phase. We're going to hear the difference. Probably not, because it's a very subtle change, but it is an exceptionally good practice to do so you don't chase your tail trying to think why something's going wrong in your stereo imaging.
For a nice pay to get the shit laid, might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
Now, if you're hearing anything with this small of a change, I would say it's more placebo than anything. But again, this is just good practice. But the advanced mode, I cannot take credit for the advanced mode because I do use this, and it actually comes from Streaky. All right. And if you've watched Streaky, you've seen him do this. This is actually a really cool technique. It's a very creative technique. I've done this technique on a few of Dugong Jr.'s records because it is so good. And what it is instead of just boosting all the air to the top end, you make the top end air move. And by that, what I mean is, instead of just having a full boost, you actually use the dynamic EQ range section to transient. Okay, so the transients out the side get popped and the rest stays the same. So you add a little bit of depth and dimension to the mix. So take a listen to this now.
Cause we in there, ain't we? Spend a home for a nice pay to get the shit laid, might as well stay. I mean,
okay, we're going to go A-B now. This is actually a really cool technique if you just want to add that sparkle to the sides, but only in the transients to keep things moving and open and not just constant and harsh.
might as well stay. I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
I really like that upgrade, and I can't take credit for it. That's all Streaky, that one. But now let's go to the final of 4 EQ moves, and that is cutting the mud. All right, they go basic. They're like, oh, it's too muddy. It's too muddy. Let's cut some mud. And when they cut mud, what they don't realize they're doing, let's say that typical 300 hertz, every person online talks about 300 hertz is the muddy frequency. That 300 hertz is where the fundamental of the vocals are. It's where the harmonics of the bass are. It's where the fundamentals of a lot of snare hits are as well. And piano instruments like a middle A is 440 hertz. So anything below that is in this frequency range, and you're cutting it. You're killing the life of your mixes when you do this. So we're going to just do something pretty conservative. We'll go negative 2 decibels at 300 because that's apparently the magic mud frequency. And I'll show you a different way to make this pop. Okay, so this is the basic version before and after.
I mean, she nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
Basic. If you want to do something cool to maybe you feel like it's muddy, you feel like it's heavy in the lows, Bob Katz in his book, Yin Yang EQ. Okay, so by Yin Yang EQ, you've got 2 ways we can do this. So we'll go to Pro Q3 over here, and you've either got, you boost the top end. So instead of doing a 2 decibel cut in the low mids, you do either a 2 decibel boost in the upper mids, or we'll go to a B version here. I'll just copy this over. Or you do a 1 decibel boost in the upper mids and 1 decibel cut in the lower mids. So you're not completely killing all that energy that's down low. Now, where are we? We'll get to 300. There we go. And that is our EQ. Instead of doing a full cut to these low mids, we relatively bring up the upper mids in opposition to it, rather than making this big, nasty cut to the low mids, which a lot of people do because that's where the mud is. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a listen to the basic, just cut the mud, versus the yin yang, and then we're going to go advanced on this because there's a really cool thing we can do to just level this up a little bit more.
She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round crowd, she ain't from round town, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like ah.
Again, subtle changes, but in the context of a full mastering session where you're making multiple changes and multiple tweaks, this will really help you. Advanced mode. Now, again, back to isotope, because I think in Ozone 11, they've added such great feature sets. I'm not a shill for Ozone 11. If anybody thinks I get any kickbacks by pushing Ozone 11, absolutely not the case. I just genuinely use it a lot, and the DSP in it is ridiculous. So, how can we elevate this yin-yang EQ? Now, there's a module in here called Clarity. Let's find it. There you are. I always forget it's in alphabetical order. Now, Clarity uses this tilt, and what you're tilting is a pink or white noise curve. And basically that tilt is like, do you want more low end? Do you want more high end? This way, that way. Okay, yin and yang. That's not where the magic is. I don't care necessarily for the fact I'm doing this. I care for the fact that I can do this either to the transient or sustain portion if I want the transients to be a bit warmer or a bit brighter, or the sustain portion if I want the sustain to be a bit warmer or the sustain to be a bit brighter, and same with the mid or side. So what I want to do is this track, I want to open up a little bit. So I'm going to bring the tilt over here. I'm going to bring the amount up, and we're going to flick through just generally having it on the stereo, which I would never do, to doing it on the side signal, which I'm more in tune to doing because I think it's nicer on the sides. A lot of the information in the mid you don't want to stuff around with like this, or the sustain and transient mode. So let's do that.
To get the shit laid, might as well stay. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like to get the shit laid, might as well stay. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like to get the shit laid, might as well stay. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she like it like wow. She nervous round cause she ain't from round time, but love to get down. She heard of that sound, got lost and then found she pop it like to get.
So with this advanced mode for the yin yang, using the clarity module, the tilt, and then isolating, either only two modes you're going to ever use is the transient mode or the side mode. Don't do this on the stereo field or the mid or the sustain because you'll warp the mix in really weird ways. But you can balance the mix in very unique ways. You can access parts of the information, the actual signal, which you otherwise can't using this, and manipulate it in a really unique way, whereby this has multiple bands of dynamic EQ shaping that part of the signal before it brings it back into itself. Now, these are four typical ways people EQ, okay? Shelves in the bottom end, bumps for the thump, cuts to the mud, tilts and whatnot to everything else. And I just wanted to add extra layers to the way you could approach EQing so you don't have to struggle through only having one EQ move. Like, I'm just going to always boost and thump and it doesn't sound good, and then I don't know what to do and I chase my tail. You need flexibility. You need comprehension of your tools and a breadth of application and knowledge for it. And that's what I hope this video brought to you. And if it did, thank you. Thank you so much. Go check out some other videos I've got. I'm going to leave like a card somewhere here. It'll suggest whatever you should be looking at. YouTube's pretty good with the algorithm. We'll go, you'll really enjoy this. So click here. I'm not going to announce a video you should watch. I'm going to let YouTube decide what you will be watching next. And until next time, take care.